Ireland's economic success has long been built on a combination of strong indigenous businesses and foreign direct investment. However, the small business representative group ISME is now warning that the country has become overly reliant on a relatively small number of multinational corporations, particularly when it comes to tax revenues and economic growth. In its pre-budget submission, ISME is calling for a renewed focus on supporting Irish-owned businesses, encouraging entrepreneurship, improving access to capital and investing in skills and training. And to discuss the challenges and opportunities facing indigenous enterprises and what changes ISME would like to see in the upcoming budget, I'm joined on the line by Siobhán Ní Ghairbith. Siobhán, of course, is an ISME National Council member and the owner of St. Tola's Goat's Cheese. Siobhán, hope you're keeping well.
I'm keeping good. Thanks, Ellen.
Thanks very much for joining us. This warning from ISME, I think there'll be very few people who'd be surprised by it. It's been talked about quite a bit, our over-reliance on foreign direct investment, and not just our over-reliance on FDI, but the very small number of multinationals as well. I suppose a fear that should the financial tectonic plates shift at some point, or geopolitical events have some sort of an impact, that one or some of these companies could up sticks and leave, and then we'd be left with a huge financial hole, I guess, which is why this issue is becoming such a concern.
Of course, Alan, and sure, we even heard recently in the news about Google laying off people, employees worldwide. I suppose they're just restructuring themselves with the growing concentration of AI, and we know how they are one of the large multinationals who employ a lot of people in this country. So it's just something that ISME has been repeatedly saying, and as you say, people are becoming more and more aware of it, because we are very, very reliant on the tax intake that we do get from these multinationals. And we see how unstable things are geopolitically at the moment. So it's really about time that the government stopped doing researches and papers and actually started taking actions. And that's why we've put forward the proposals, ISME put forward the proposals with regard to the upcoming budget in October.
The submission from ISME highlighting that just 297 companies account for the vast majority of our corporation tax receipts, which creates significant risk for the Irish economy, particularly when you think about the huge percentage of tax that the government gets from just a small percentage of the bigger multinationals.
Yeah, I mean, anybody, you don't need to be a mathematician just to look at the simple numbers that are there. We are so reliant in this country on on those 297 companies. It sounds like such a small number when you look at it, but I mean, we have been very fortunate, and the country has benefited hugely from these big windfall taxes we have been getting from the multinationals. But we have to plan, and that is what government is there for. We have to plan for the future, the immediate, the medium and the long-term future. And we cannot take for granted that we are going to be having these companies, these multinationals that are only, as you say, 297 of them, that we are not going to have them continuously. And the government needs to be supporting small to medium enterprises and encouraging them rather than disencourage them with the policies of the moment, because enterprise policy should be guiding tax policy, but the way it's happening at the moment, it's the reverse. I mean, we get great support from the Department of Enterprise when they come talk to us within ISME, but then when they go over to talk to their colleagues in the tax department, they say, oh, no, that's not possible. And we really, I mean, are we proud or are we not proud of our own indigenous enterprises here in Clare and here in Ireland? And if we are, we must support them, and we must just not talk about supporting, we must take action, not just as government, but as individuals, because the day will come that we will not have these windfall taxes that have kept the country, we're being told, as one of the wealthiest countries in the world, because we need to support our small to medium enterprises and to help them grow.
And that is something we have touched on the show before from those business owners, owners of small and medium enterprises, that they feel the government, there isn't enough attention. It sounds like from what you're saying, Siobhán, maybe there's a significant amount of attention, but just not the same level of support that multinational companies receive, particularly when it comes to those conversations in the tax department, the tax office.
Yeah, I'm a great believer, Alan, that talk is cheap. Actions speak way louder than words. And we've had these conversations since I've been on the National Council for the last number of years with you, Alan. We've been continually having these conversations, and things are not changing. If anything, they're getting harder and harder for small to medium enterprises to survive, because the government seems to have this policy of one rule suits all. But one rule can't suit all. If you're a very large company or a multinational, to have the same laws for them as to have small, medium enterprises, it is counterintuitive. And we see it up and down, even the streets of Venice, the streets of our towns, throughout County Clare. You see small businesses shutting, and then you have, large international companies opening, even when it comes to, the industry I'm in is in the food industry, production and food production and servicing the hospitality industry. And we see that how people are struggling. So we need to stop, the politicians need to stop talking, and they need to, bring in the policies. This is why we have put these proposals to the government in plenty of time before the upcoming in October, the budget in October, so that time will be given to them and not decisions. We can't go along with steady as we go, which the government have been relying on for too long in this country, because nothing is steady anymore, as we can see. In a local level, in a national level, and very much in a world level. And we as a nation have become too independent on multinational companies, and we are putting ourselves in huge danger as a country, which is so good at creating new enterprises, independent businesses, indigenous businesses. But we're losing our focus because we are taking for granted what has been successful in the country so far. But you should never, ignore one side for the sake of the other, because we could live to rue that day, which hopefully none of us want to see. What has happened in practice, in economic practice in the country before. And in 2016, Italy as a country looked at how they could improve things for their own country and they focused on small to medium enterprises, indigenous industries, and they actually surpassed Japan on a global scale from an export point of view. And the government really need to focus on this and not just talk about it, because we've been beating the same drum for years at this stage, but it's not being, the right decisions aren't being made because of this steady as we go attitude.
Okay, and in terms of the right decisions being made, your pre-budget submission is trying to guide the government in that regard to making the right decisions. You're calling for Budget 2027 to place a stronger focus on homegrown enterprises. One of the proposals involves changes to capital gains tax, while ISME is also seeking reforms to research and development supports. The access to finance is another key issue that's been highlighted in the submission. How would these kind of changes benefit small and medium enterprises?
Well, access to capital is key, because it is very challenging, because there are very few lending institutions who are very difficult. I know from my own business, to get, even having a very good track record over the last 27 years that I've been in business. I've always paid my loans, I've always paid, whatever was owed, but trying to get money from the institutions is very, very challenging, and the government needs to talk to these lending institutions and give them, to put them under pressure, and to show enterprises that are up and running, are established, are successful, have a good track record, they need to be shown this support. And then obviously with tax, the way the tax regulations at the moment is kind of anti-growth from a small to medium enterprise, whereas it needs to be proactive. We need to be encouraging businesses to grow, to take on extra employees, to provide employment in rural areas, the length and breadth of County Clare and the countryside, because we see that the countryside, that people are leaving the countryside and having to go to, the cities. We see that just from a very local level, from a game as a sporting point of view, from the GAA, you're seeing clubs having to amalgamate, because there just aren't enough people in rural Ireland to put teams together. And this is the practical reality of it. And as a country, there are a lot of us still living in the countryside, and we need the government not just to be focusing on the big multinationals that are focused in the big cities, but if they care about those of us who live in the countryside, our politicians will be doing everything to help support the indigenous businesses in their counties that have a good and excellent track record.
OK, it'll be interesting to see how that pre-budget submission is received by the government. Siobhán, thank you very much for joining us on the show, and have a great weekend.
Thank you, Ellen. And if we get as much support from our politicians and government as we do get from the media like yourselves for covering this, we will be doing great. Thank you, Ellen.
Siobhán Ní Ghairbith there, ISME National Council member and the owner of St. Tola's Goat's Cheese, with us on Friday's Morning Focus.